Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. It's 7 p.m. Before we call the meeting to order, I just want to thank Rosemary for making such a phenomenal setup here. So thank you so much, Rosemary. You're cooked. Thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 7 p.m. Madam Clerk?
I hope it is. Mayor Troopman,
Here.
Vice Mayor Tudor,
Here.
Commissioner Butte,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson Sardare,
Absent.
Commissioner Ross.
Here. Oh, can we all stand for the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any deletions or withdrawals for the agenda?
I have one deletion. I'd like to pull item 10A. In reviewing it today, I just saw some errors on that one that really just needs some more refinement, so I would like to bring that back at another time.
Commissioner Ross?
Yes, I had hoped to see on the agenda something to do with the trim notice, and it's not there, so I think we should have just a little discussion about how we're going to approach that.
Okay. We'll go ahead and put that under new business 12B. Commissioner Sally Hayman was here we have presented her with a proclamation, but she got caught up in the rain, so what we're going to do is go ahead and continue, and then we'll stop when she gets here and go ahead and do the proclamation at that time, if there are no objections. Open to public comments? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, public comments? No public comments?
Fred Jonas, 918 119th Street. Is it as hard for you to hear me as it is for me to hear you all?
What did you say?
The sound is very, very low. It's
Can
very
you
hard
talk
to hear.
close to the mic,
Yeah.
please?
Anyway, I wanted to talk about Ordinance 2018-3, which has to do with feeding animals. And I'm sure that everybody has heard the phrase herding cats. It's a joke. Nobody can really herd cats. It's stupid, but it's kind of an iconic thing that people say. And 9A essentially is that. It is some kind of imagined effort to herd cats into somebody's backyard as if they would stay there. And it puts me in mind of the idea that if we thought we had a problem with mosquitoes in the village, and I promised that I would put some large tubs of water in my backyard so all the mosquitoes would just go there and I'd feed them, it wouldn't be hard for anybody to figure out what was wrong with that. That's exactly what 9A does. So I hope you will kind of look again at that, think it through a little bit, and vote it down.
Thank you.
Good evening. David Raymond, 11520 Northeast 9th Avenue. Same item that Fred just talked about, cats. And I don't know, is there an opportunity when you do the ordinance for public comment at that point? Would it be more appropriate to speak to it then?
Probably so.
Okay.
If you don't mind waiting. Thank you so much.
Mayor, public reading or public hearing is the second reading, not the first, I believe, right?
No, we have, we might have a resolution on it from maybe way 2008 or 9, but in this village, we always have public comment at a first reading.
Okay.
We've always historically done that, so I have no problem in this case with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we can check on that ordinance for next time just to make sure we're up to date on it, please. Thank you.
Chuck Ross, 11166 Griffin Boulevard. I got a couple of, I would call them procedural things. The first thing that I'm concerned about is that this is the third month in a row that the agenda is coming out late. I think the posting actually at Village Hall, I think for today's meeting was yesterday. And then there's a meeting tomorrow was posted today sometime. I don't believe under 286.011 that's reasonable, but we can ask the attorney that. We used to have a policy in the past before this commission that on Tuesday there would be a draft agenda issued to the commission, and on Thursday we would have a full agenda issued to the public. Also, forgot to mention we've been sending out info blasts to the residents that are on the email list, but that wasn't done for either today's meeting or tomorrow's meeting either. Meanwhile, I don't believe that only having it listed on the calendar on the website is sufficient notice, particularly when it's not on the home page. The other thing that I'm concerned about is we have a board that's been meeting called the Public Safety Advisory Board. My concern with the Public Safety Advisory Board is that they haven't been, and actually by now we should have all of the new members and the new boards that should receive instructions as to the Sunshine Law. But particularly this board, because nobody on this particular board, I don't believe, has ever been on a board in Biscayne Park before. So it's critical that these people understand what the broad and overreaching issues are that can be with the Sunshine Law, and they haven't had that instruction. Further, that board is supposed to take its direction from you, the commission. They haven't been given any directions yet, but they've had 2 meetings. That's a further concern, which I voiced at the last meeting. Next problem that I have is I don't think either meeting had a posted agenda. Now, I understand under this 286 I think it's .011 as well, you don't have to have an agenda for a meeting, but you do have to notice if 2 or more elected officials might be at the meeting. So that's a disclosure that should have been on an agenda. That wasn't done. Let's see, what else do I want to complain about that board? The board is fine as far as I like what the idea. I'm not complaining about the members. I think that the chair particularly is an experienced person, so don't get me wrong. It's not the board itself, and it's not their fault. I believe it's the administration that is not setting this board in the right direction. So let me be clear about that. No complaints about the board members. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, we'll close public comments. And actually, we're going to take a moment to return to an item. We're going to go back to 5, which is presentations. We welcome Commissioner Sally Hayman through the pouring rain.
Is that dedication or what?
Welcome. We're going to have a proclamation today in honor and recognition of Commissioner Sally Hayman for her service to the Village of Biscayne Park, Miami-Dade County, and the state of Florida. Whereas Sally Hayman was recently reelected by acclamation to a 4-year term as the District 4 seat of the Miami-Dade County Commission, which geographically includes the Village of Biscayne Park, retaining the seat since first elected in September 2002. And whereas Commissioner Hayman previously served in the Florida House of Representatives for 4 consecutive terms, starting in 1994, where she sponsored legislation on public safety, addressing domestic violence, juvenile justice, boat safety, elderly and child abuse, and end-of-life directives, outreach for high-risk pregnant women, and adoption foster care. And whereas before going to the Florida House, Sally Hayman defended home rule, serving 7 years as council member in the neighboring city of North Miami Beach, and started a career of public service working for the City of Miami and North Miami Beach Police Departments. And whereas Commissioner Hayman's educational and professional background in criminal justice and law enforcement include a Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of Florida, a Master in Science degree from Nova University, a Juris Doctorate from the University of Miami, and state and national certifications in crime, loss, and prevention. And whereas throughout her years of service, Commissioner Hayman has displayed untiring energy in supporting human rights issues, especially in the areas of funding social services, the protection and care of women, children, and vulnerable adults, protecting personal freedoms, affordable health care, animal protection, and green sustainability. And whereas Commissioner Hayman also remains close to her community, participating in local events with her familiar coffee break truck, which we all know and adore, her hosting a forum of local interests from spade and neutering surgeries, vaccination for cats and dogs, helping families with school supplies and holiday food distribution, to informative workshops on many issues. Whereas Commissioner Hayman continues to focus on District 4's priorities, such as responsible growth management through infill development with adequate infrastructure, transportation and mass transit through regional studying and planning for light rail on the FEC corridor. And we're working with all levels of government on regional hurricane strategy plans for Northeast Miami-Dade. Whereas Village Commission residents and visitors appreciate Sally Hayman's personal style and decades of passion service to the Village of Biscayne Park, Miami-Dade County. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, do hereby honor and congratulate Sally Hayman for outstanding service. We further proclaim that July 10th, 2018, in the pouring rain, that's not in the proclamation, Sally Hayman's Day, and wish her well on her future endeavors. Would everybody like to go in? Jimmy's signature. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is information updates. Police updates by Chief Cabrera.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to begin by stating that I am humbled to have the opportunity to serve you. All the residents of Biscayne Park have been warm and loving to me, and for that I thank you. I have a true passion for public safety, and I strongly believe in building positive relationships, both with the community at large and with each resident. With over 30 years of law enforcement experience in the city of Miami, I understand that the residents and the visitors are my most important assets and partners in this relationship. My goal in the village of Biscayne Park will be to institute police services that focus on community priorities. I want you to know that I am aware that traffic enforcement, directed patrolling, police visibility, community policing are the essential components that will institute positive police change in your village. I am also honored to welcome back Commander Nick Walslager. Thank you, Nick. He will be the operations commander for the department. He has a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge and operational experience, which will prove very, very valuable. Together, we have reorganized the way we supervise our staff and the way that we're going to be affecting command at different levels. I would like to also highlight a few initiatives that we're currently working on that will be important to the residents. Number one, we've created patrol zones. We've divided the village into two sections, both the east and the west zone. This will allow for greater visibility and accountability, so everybody will be able to tell where their officers are at and what they're doing during what times. We've also implemented the village resource officer, which will be Officer Llanos. Officer Llanos will be working with the Crime Watch, with the community policing programs, and with Court Watch and many other programs that will help bridge and unite the community with the police department. I've also taken several steps to institute and develop training for our law enforcement officers. I have met with the FBI, with FDLE, and other local and state agencies to bring additional training to our officers to ensure that our officers have the highest training and standards in the country. We are also working on an MOU, which we have just completed, to ensure that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement conducts all our shootings, officer shootings, and our criminal and corruption investigations, so we never have what we had before occur. Finally, we're working on a program at the park in order to institute a park officer, which is the central hub of this community. The park officer will be able to be more visible, work with the kids in different programs, and assist in the patrolling of the park. We have also added an additional 8 officers to our reserve program since I've been here in the last 5 weeks. One of the reserve officers we've added has been a detective that was part of the City of Miami's homicide squad for 31 years and then served in Miami Gardens Criminal Division for another 10. So we have now seasoned and knowledgeable experience on our investigative unit. I'm opening the floor for any questions that anybody may have at this time.
It's unusual, but I have no problem with that. Are there any questions for the chief?
Chief, how many total reserve officers do we have?
We've increased the reserve program to 16 since I took over, and we're looking at adding probably another 5 more within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Any other questions? Commissioner
Yes,
Ross?
I do. Question, Chief. We have, and I'm sure that you don't have all of the history of the village yet and catching up with us, but we have in the past seen interagency agreements with other police departments.
Correct.
And they usually come up to the commission with a resolution. It's a good way of reminding people how interagencies help each other out. We get help from other cities. We help other cities. And then you mentioned the MOU with FDLE. Will we be seeing those agreements again as we had in the past?
The MOU that we just drafted with FTLE was an MOU to handle the officer shootings, which are MOUs that are occurring across the state. So these don't come in front of the commission.
Okay.
It's part of just a shooting package. When we enter into agreements that are going to, be a financial or are going to impact the community, we do bring those in front of the commission.
Right. Well, the ones that I'm referring to were not necessarily financial, but I know, for example, the officers use the gun range out in Medley.
Correct.
And so there's an interlocal with the Medley Police Department for that use.
Right.
It covers liability issues and
cost, yeah, there is a cost there.
right. Okay.
For example, we have and it happened just recently, we have MOUs with Miami-Dade County to use their aviation units, to use their canine units, to their sexual battery units if we have an issue that, or long-term investigation. So these are MOUs that are developed throughout the years that some come to commission and some are just with the local agencies.
Okay, so is the distinction operational versus policy? Is that where you
It's
would draw the
operational,
line?
yes.
Okay. Okay. We haven't seen those interagency agreements in all of last year, and I don't know how long they get to be renewed, but I'm sure that the officers themselves maintain the relationships with other agencies, but I think we also have to do it on the books.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I will make sure that I provide that to the manager. I just signed it today, so I kind of let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah.
So, we'll bring it forward, and it goes to the FDLE commissioner for final approval.
Okay. So, but the mutual aid agreements with, say, Miami Shores, North Miami, those types of
Those
things?
come in front of the commission.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much. He's only been here 5 weeks, but it seems much longer. Thank you for all your work. Next is financial updates with Paul Winklejohn.
Good evening. A couple quick updates for you since our last meeting where we were finalizing the 2016 audit. The 2017 financials have been completely reconstructed and a trial balance was submitted and circulated. We also should have documents and final financials ready for the auditor in the next few days for them to get started. That's well ahead of what we were hoping for, so that's all good news. A couple of sequential issues. I would have liked to have given you some draft budget documents by this time. Those should be useful in the next 2 weeks, hopefully, maybe 3, before your August meeting, without a doubt, whatever it takes. The reason that those would not have been very useful to you until today is the merging of the data and the financial information that we get from a trial balance from 2017 is what creates the 18 numbers that we don't have yet, that we have the projections for the rest of the year. So because of that, it would be a really false number, not in a large scale, but in small amounts. And it would just start to have to constantly be corrected. So you're going to have that. And I saw on your agenda that you're doing 2 very important things, is setting your workshop. We'll provide the live information for that activity, of course, whenever you schedule it. And also on your agenda, your first reading of the refinancing. That's a vital element for you because, as you know, when you dip into your savings to a storm at well into $1 million, you need to free up your cash. And so that loan will do that for you. So as a finance director, it has my full support. Any questions?
Are there any questions?
Yes. Thank you for distributing the balance sheet and the trial balance that went along with it. I do remember seeing from Sharon in the cover email that there's still adjustments that need to be made, and so maybe that's why rather than go through a bunch of questions that I have, because things did seem out of whack, like they're in the wrong place, or a fund is showing a very an overly positive balance that
Right.
shouldn't be there because maybe funds needed to be transferred to the general fund. And rather than waste time going through all that, maybe next week sometime or next time you're back, we could sit down.
Yes and yes. The first part of that is there's the other thing I didn't give you, which is usually not the way I give presentations. What I didn't give you are financials for this month or for last month as well. Same reason. There are too many switches going on that the way they would come out of the computer, so to speak, would be wrong. And the funds would be fine as a balance, but the fund due tos and due froms have not been adjusted. Typically, you would wait until you had the 17 audit to do that, but of course that's not realistic because we're behind. I'm going to do where she's doing those now. We call it merging, basically. She's merging the found data and the found line items, just putting things in the right account codes from 16 into 17 and then 17 into the current year. So what happened was you sort of lost your base a little bit on what the financials would look like compared to last month's. So they wouldn't match. And so with that, she's going back and correcting them all so that the funds are in the right places or labeled the right way is actually more accurate. So all that said, looks good, but I didn't have an answer for you if you did have it right now. So if you had a question on that, some of the things in the 17 did look good. It was clearly a better reconstruction than 16. That year, you had much more consistency in your account coding, and so I'm pretty comfortable that we're going to meet those deadlines. We're going to have last month's financials will be done probably later tomorrow or the end of this week. Then they'll go right into a 2019 draft budget. At the same time, the auditor starts 17. So all 3 things that I said are happening basically the end of this week, early next week. So a meeting, if you would like, would be excellent anytime next week.
Okay, and as far as you mentioned setting the trim, things that we're going to do later this evening, I'm concerned because cities around us are already meeting for their workshops and are already setting the trim. So I want to make sure that from your end we're ready
Yeah,
to proceed with those.
I've
things.
had a headache for about 3 months that we're not scheduling these things, but I'm also relieved that they would have been wasteful time for the reasons I said earlier. I think we're going to have such tight information in the next 2 weeks or so that the workshop in August, whatever your calendars are, we'll figure it out. That's when all those reports will be the most used to you, and you'll be able to make projections or opinions based on the most factual information. So I'm comfortable that because of the dynamics of the city and its financial situation, I think the things you're gonna chew on are not large changes. They're not that they're unimportant. I don't mean that. I just mean that they're the kind of thing that you're going to be able to tackle in a workshop. It's not going to take months of research, like that kind of thing. So when cities do those large, efforts way in advance, is because they might change a significant fund practice. They may restructure major departments, which could have, it could take weeks and months for staff to develop analysis. And in your case, I feel like I can keep up with you.
Just one final thing, because you said free up money with the ordinance that's on the agenda.
Yeah, that's simply a cash flow topic. Because you took $1 million out of your annual cash flow, what happens in government is you have no new revenue, so to speak, from October through December. So those 3 months are funded by some other money, and it would be prior year savings. When you take $1 million off of your books, you don't have any money for those 3 months, in essence. So you have to squeeze everything you have into a very small cash flow, or you dip into your reserves. Fortunately, you have reserves. I'll know, right, you burn about $50,000, $60,000 every 2 weeks. You have just about that much between now and October. So any expenses will mean you're going to go into your reserves. So what I'll do for your August meeting and these reports is I'll tell you if you need to use $100,000 of reserves till October 1 or to December, somewhere in that line. It wouldn't surprise me if that's what you have to do. FEMA money comes back in, that'll never happen to you because you have that, what we call first quarter operating cash flow or cash base in your operating accounts. You don't have that because you spent it for obvious reasons.
Right. I saw today, actually, El Portal has a special meeting or their regular meeting, and one of the things on their agenda is a line of credit through Florida Community Bank, and it's they pledged their FEMA, which is still in flux, for that line of credit. Just something for you to chew on.
I actually brought that up with the banker when I talked to him. When we met with him quickly, I asked him if there was line of credits in this banking arrangement, and I believe there absolutely is. Pledging wasn't really even discussed. I think it was just on the obvious stance that the city can maintain. But going, if that improves your rate, or if that were really necessary, absolutely. That's not uncommon. I've seen that done, as well as El Portal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got one
Yes, sir.
question. Are we ever going to be in a position where we do not have to make all these slight adjustments, or will they be made once every 6 months, or?
Yeah, yes, definitely. That's certainly the goal I live in. I am built as a business for a lot less work, frankly. So I'm looking forward to it myself. It's very demanding to live in this environment for all of us, and it's not pleasant. But we're going to get you there really shortly. My mind is October 1 through next year. You should have a budget that matches, because the budget will be right. You follow me? And then your accounting practices will be 100% consistent with what was intended. Not 100%, but it's close enough to what was intended with your actual practice. And so that the two will follow each other. What happens now is you have a proposed budget, and then you have an actual, and because there were inconsistencies in the interpretation of those lines, this account is this account, and you spend every 2 months saying, last month we got it wrong, and it's all washing out. There's nothing unusual. It's just really hard to say for sure, that when you make a budget, that's what you meant. When you weren't here, or when there's a lot of staff change, the principles have all moved. So, yes, I look forward to that. One of the things I like to do is language, put common language around ideas and plans, in little bullets next or just off the budget, so that when we go back 6 months, I don't remember like I used to. Maybe some of you feel that way too about yourselves. I like to, to look it up and say that's what we meant to do. We're not doing it that way. Should we change one or the other? You know, I like to document. So if you get the budget right, you document it, and your accountant is the same person who did the budget, it all works.
Just one further comment or question or
Yes.
clarification. So after digging out of the 2015, 16, and now 17, the theory is that our 2018 audit, as well as our 2019 budget, will jive to the point where we know what the heck is going on real time, pretty much, monthly
Yes.
at least,
Yeah,
correct?
so all the funds and the way the accountants look at them will be in the right language and in the right terms. I mean, the big picture, not to make anyone nervous, is we know what our revenue is, we know what our expenses are. None of those have changed. It's just meeting the accounting terminology and flowing through, from one bank to another. It's a lot of crossover. So we want to get that clean and really clear.
So it's transparent. Bottom
So it's
line
just-
is the
it's always
public will
transparent,
know
but the
what's going
same
on.
every time.
Right.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, if I could follow up, thank you. Since you say big picture, I was encouraged to see, even though there are adjustments that need to be made with that 2017 trial balance, that
Yeah, you saw the balance, right?
that the bottom line was we had an increase in
Yeah, I mean, right now, the unaudited
I'm sorry, we
financials-
had an increase in unrestricted funds. So assuming we get back a substantial amount of FEMA reimbursement, I think that we would still be, would you say we still be?
Yeah,
in
your
a
end of
positive
17 was
position?
over $200,000 net. That's about the right amount. That's a little better than 10%. That's a good standard to keep. I wouldn't give that up ever. And as you build your reserves, usually you want a full year operating in your reserves. That would be reasonable. You were on pace to do that. You're not because of the storm.
Right.
When the
Although our GASB really says, I think we're at 15, our GASB, I think, says 15%.
Right.
But yeah, I would feel much more secure to have 8, 9, or 12 months.
Right. Yeah, and as you give direction on what your ad valorem will be, we got the solid waste right. I think that's a little correction. Those are the kinds of things that there's only $15,000 of adjustment, but that's meaningful when you start getting everything more accurate throughout your entire course.
And just one other follow-up. One of the challenges I've noticed with one of our sister cities who, because of the contract that our manager did, we got, I'm trying to say, a very good deal on hauling, about 1/3 of what other municipalities paid. So we were able to keep our cleanup at a lower cost. And I know $1 million is a tremendous amount of money. But if you looked at some of the other cities, I think they were significantly higher. So the idea for me, and I think during our planning session last year, every single member up here agreed that we should make sure our reserves are high, and we can look at that again this year moving forward for our next year's budget. But I know there was a consensus that we need to make sure our reserves are high enough to deal with a natural disaster, because this was a
Right.
brush. This wasn't even a full hit.
Yeah, you're a step better than that because the nature of your debris hauling and the nature of your removal was you don't have to replace it as much. Many communities are stuck with environmental situations that they're going to have to repair. They're going to replace things. So not only did they front the $1 million, using that number, to fix the storm damage, but to remove it, they have to save money or take money from other places to correct the missing trees that they have to meet. In your situation, you don't have as much of a demand on you as for what I'm seeing. So there's other problems out there, so feel good about that.
Thank you very much.
My
Any other
pleasure.
questions? All right, thank you, sir, so much. I'm sure we'll have some more questions coming forward in the next item. On the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent?
I'm going to ask to remove, just for comment, on the board minutes with regard to public safety, but they all travel together, so I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda absent 8B.
All of 8B?
Can we break up 8B?
There's nothing against that. It's up to the chair. If
I have no problem with you just pulling the item that you want so we can move forward,
So then it's just the Public Safety Advisory Board minutes.
of May 9th.
Motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I thought it was important to talk about it. Chuck mentioned some things that I hope the administration is going to take to heart and address with regard to the instruction on sunshine, the noticing, and the agenda. And my primary concern is because there wasn't an agenda that was posted, we always post in our board agendas a notice that says 2 or more members of the Village of Biscayne Park Commission and other village members may be in attendance. And that's to advise the public that, I mean, it's sort of required if we're going to have 2 commissioners at a meeting and they may comment on something, it's required to notice the public that that could occur. And since we didn't have the agenda out for public safety, and in the minutes it's reflected that 2 commissioners were present, I want to avoid anyone getting into trouble over these issues. I'll have been here, I want to make it out of my term in office without getting into any kind of sunshine trouble. And so it's important that we do these things because it has other impacts. It's not just a matter of, you know, getting information to people on what the board is doing, but also if the commission is going to be participating at those meetings, it's a sunshine violation not to have it posted.
So is your objection to the actual minutes, or your objection is to, I just want to be clear so we're following procedure here. So your objection is not to the contents of the actual board minutes. Your objection is to the fact that on the agenda itself or the minutes, it does not say 2 or more board members? I'm trying to figure out why we're pulling this item from the consent agenda if it's not an item. If you have another issue associated with the board, I'm just trying to figure out why it was pulled from consent.
Would you like me to respond?
Yeah.
I didn't say the word objection. I said I wanted to remove them in order to discuss and comment on the minutes of the Public Safety Advisory Board.
Then might I suggest?
I've made my comment, and I'm sure that the administration's taking it to heart. I don't have an issue with the minutes themselves, but I thought it was very important.
I have no objection, but you meet with the manager weekly. If there was an issue, I have no problem with you doing it. I don't disagree with anything you said. I just, from a matter of precedent here, we shouldn't be pulling minutes. If we're discussing minutes, we should be approving minutes or not approving minutes. If there's something else, it should be in the addition and withdrawal section from the agenda, please.
Excuse me, but 8B, the question under 8B is, do you accept these board minutes? And I will accept them, provided that these comments are taken to heart, because it is important. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I just want to make sure. And by the way, we didn't get these minutes until after 5 o'clock on Friday, so I was not able to review them by the time I met with the manager Friday afternoon. I mean, we're caught in a very difficult spot, and this is the time to bring it up and make sure that everyone is aware, for my own benefit and for your benefit, for the benefit of everybody on this dais.
I understand what you're saying. As I said, I wasn't disagreeing with what you're saying regarding notice. I thought it was noticed, so I was not aware of that. And was it noticed? I'd like the manager to have a chance to comment.
Actually, I'll have to defer to the clerk on that one. Roseanne? Was this noticed for the special, for the Public Safety Advisory Board?
If it was posted?
Was it posted? Was it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Was it posted
On the
where?
calendar, on the website.
On the website. Not at
Yeah.
Village Hall, though?
No.
Was there an agenda?
Yes, there was an agenda.
It's not on the website, even today. So there was no opportunity to give that notice to say 2 members of the village commission could be present at the meeting.
Well,
Okay. That is something that
Maybe there's
will definitely clear up.
something, but there was an agenda and it was posted on the website. I don't know what happened. I can check.
If you can clarify and just make sure that, I think if we can make sure that these are proper, if there's an issue that's properly done, if there wasn't, it needs to be corrected. And I also do think regarding e-blast minutes, we don't e-blast every board. Do we e-blast every single meeting out? We don't. We put it on the agenda. So we haven't historically e-blasted out every meeting it happens. So that I don't think can happen unless we change that, which I don't concur with.
Okay, just for clarity, it does need to be posted on the website, but it also needs to be physically posted at Village Hall. Historically, we've also posted at the rec center and at Public Works as well. And that should be for any publicly noticed board meeting, commission meeting, and so forth. So if that hasn't been done, that will be done going forward.
So for the minutes that are included under item 8B to the May 30th meeting, I just pulled up our calendar, and there's no agenda posted on May 30th. So the issue is, if we don't have a full agenda, at least it has to be posted that there's going to be a meeting and two or more commissioners could be present. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Having clarified your concerns, do we have a motion to move to accept the minutes as they are currently listed, with the correction that two or more board members are going to be on it from now on in the future?
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
Yes, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, first reading ordinance 2018-03. We'll open for public comments after the attorney. Go ahead and reads the ordinance, please.
This is ordinance number 2018-03, an ordinance of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, creating new section 3.6 of the Code of Ordinances of the Village of Biscayne Park entitled Feeding of Animals, providing for conflicts, providing for codification, providing for severability, providing for an effective date. This is a request to pass and adopt and set second reading for August 7th?
I believe so.
August 7th of 2018.
Okay, open for public comments. This is the regarding feeding of animals. Are there any public comments?
Hello again. David Raymond, 11520 Northeast 9th Avenue. So a few things on this. And I know I did reach out to the commissioners. This was supposed to be moving forward the last meeting, and I appreciate Anna Harvey took my call, even though you weren't feeling 100%, and I appreciate that. But I guess I have a philosophical issue with the ordinance, and then I have more of a logistical one in how it reads. So let me start with the more logistical one, because I don't know how this even exists in the legal context, and I would address this to the attorney, because the way it's written right now, I have to get rid of my bird feeder, and the squirrels have to go, because what it says is that you're adding section 3.6, no person shall feed any animal outdoors. Bird is an animal, a squirrel is an animal, just saying. Except an owner of a personal pet may feed a personal pet in a rear yard of a residentially zoned property so long as the pet owner and pet are lawfully upon their private land. So I don't know how a pet is private, it has some legal rights to be on the land, and I don't know how the definition, there's no definitions in this whatsoever. So I don't know how this even exists legally, how this could be enforced or how it could be in code the way it's written right now, because I don't know that an animal has some legal right to be on property and then if it's a personal pet. So now let me get to the philosophical part. So that personal pet. So I know the intent here in my mind, or I should say, let me say I assume the intent, is that we have all these stray cats mostly, and we have some stray dogs, but mostly it's cats. We have tried, and as you know, I have tried through the Miami Veterinary Foundation, it's a board I sit on, to bring in trappers to help with the cat situation. It's helped and it hasn't, because we didn't get all of the cats, unfortunately. There's still an issue with the cats on my block, where we trapped 25 cats and had them fixed, had them vaccinated, which this ordinance also talks about them not being vaccinated. So right now, all of the cats that we trapped were vaccinated against rabies, were dewormed, were ear-tipped, fixed, and released. By law, they have to be released where you find them. So they were re-released exactly where they were. But they didn't get all the cats, obviously, because or somebody else brought in new cats, because we have more kittens down the block, unfortunately. And I know this isn't just about that one particular street. I'm just using that as an example. So moving feeding into the backyard doesn't seem to do anything at all when it comes to the other part of the code, which is you can only have 4 animals who are your own pets, the way our code is written currently. And the animals, the way the code's written, correct me if I'm wrong, is cats, dogs, combination of cats and dogs. The county code has nothing whatsoever about cats, by the way. It's only dogs. Same 4, up to an acre of property. So what would happen with all these cats if we start to try to enforce what we currently have? The county won't take them. I did reach out, and I know I shared this with our mayor, and I shared it with Christian, and I did have a conversation with the chief of shelter services and the live program release, Lorna Mieja from Miami-Dade County Animal Services today. Nobody's going to come take, if you have more than 4 cats, somebody has the 5th cat that code comes out, Christian and writes them up for, nobody will take an adult feral cat. Animal Services won't take them because they will get in there and tear up the population they have of adoptable animals. They will take kittens. And they're happy to come out and do another trapping program with us. And I just, as I said, just had that offer today, and I'm happy to work with the manager to set that up to try to do another trap. We did it in December, and we did trap 31 animals at that time. So all that to say, to come back to this, I don't know where that this gets us any place where we want to be. In fact, I think it's just kind of moving the problem out of sight. And I think the way it's written now, unless it has some definitions and is reworked, is just doesn't make any sense to me. So thank you.
Thank you, David.
Chuck Ross on 1166 Griffin Boulevard. I'm just going to say I concur with everything David just said. The ordinance makes no sense whatsoever. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any further comments? Okay, we'll open up for discussion among the commissioners. Since it was your ordinance?
Yes, since it's my ordinance, let me speak about this. First thing is, we now have on the books an ordinance that allows open feeding of animals anywhere on your property, front yard, backyard, anywhere. That exists, as it is right now. The one thing that I've always felt that I thought was bad was seeing all the paper plates and all the other stuff on people's front yards where they're feeding their animals. 4 months ago, I wanted to change the old ordinance to just say you can no longer feed your animals in your front yard. It would get rid of all the trash in the front of the house and in the yards. That's all it said. Really nice, very simple. We added a half a dozen words. This is what happens. Nobody could agree upon it, and we went overboard on stuff. All we had to do was say, you can't feed in the front yard. If you feed in the backyard, will it in fact decrease the number of animals? Maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know. Will it make some of the animals stay in the backyard? Maybe yes, maybe no. Will it increase the number of animals in the front yard? No, because there's nothing you're doing that's going to make more animals go in your front yard, because now you're feeding them in the back. Some will stay there, but animals all of a sudden are not going to come into your front yard saying, oh, they used to feed, they're not feeding now. Again, it was like 4 or 5 words. It was simple, it was easy, we could have passed it 3 months ago. That was the whole point of it, getting the blight off part of the street. As far as controlling the cats, difficult thing to do. I wasn't trying to control the cats. I just wanted the neighborhood to look a little bit better. And that's all it was. So that's all I really wanted. Yeah, is some of this a little bit wordy? Some of it doesn't really make some sort of sense. But again, it's in somebody's backyard. We cannot enforce what goes in somebody's backyard because we can't get there. Unless your neighbor will let somebody lean over their fence and take a look what's going on. But the point is to get all of the paper plates and all of the dishes off of the front yard, and that's what it was meant for.
Thank you.
As far as people having too many cats and what they do with it, I'm not really sure. But this was not addressing it. All it was saying was you can't feed them in the front yard. Simple.
Other commissioners? You want to comment?
Yeah, I have to agree with some of the public comments that have already been made. One of the issues I had with just the wording of,
For closer, please.
with the wording of the ordinance as it is currently, it limits the, sorry, I can't lift both arms. But
That's okay.
Limits the feeding to the rear property only. I can see where that could end up causing some issues. Now that limits a person's ability, let's say they're walking their dog around the park and they want to give the dog a treat as they're walking the dog, or if they're in the front yard, they're sitting on their porch and they want to give the dogs a couple of treats while they're sitting out there enjoying a nice, cool Miami evening. Now all of a sudden, they may be run afoul of this ordinance. So I think I know what the intent is, but I don't think this really addresses the issue that is really the issue here in Biscayne Park, is the stray and feral cats. Unfortunately, a lot of other cities have tried to tackle this problem, and a lot of other cities who have tried to do so have not been successful because it is a very tricky situation, and we can't rely on the county to come in and take these cats. So it is what it is. So going back to this ordinance, the way it's currently worded, yeah, there's no way that I would feel comfortable even being able to sign off on something like this.
I'm going to just share with you, I wasn't planning on doing this evening, but I think based upon David Raymond's comments and some of the other comments, I'm going to express to you that I spent quite a bit of time putting together the ordinance and pulled it. It was for the harboring of stray cats. I spent quite a bit of time researching it, looking at what national standards were, what other places that were successful, and then looking at the code within Miami-Dade so that we weren't biting off a financial part that we couldn't basically follow through on. There is no licensing of cats. This is really the critical piece that makes it allowable to know who owns the pet and who doesn't own the pet. After that, it's interpretable. Cats on your porch, they come every night. Do you own them or do you not? If you say you own them, you do. If you don't say you own them, they don't. If you change your mind, who knows? And the issue becomes, how do you stop a person? And this is really, to me, the crux of the problem. And I am living down the street, like David, sharing the same, probably, I'm going to guess 50 cats. I don't really know. There's just a tremendous amount of them, 25, 50, 40. I don't know the number. And they visit my property regularly and entertain themselves quite frequently in the middle of the night. I understand the problem. The issue is, and I've rescued animals since I was about 5 years old. So I've been an animal person for years. The problem is when one person decides that they don't fix their animals and they allow them to continue to breed and breed and breed out of control, now we have a problem that's much bigger. If we put in an ordinance that allows us to fine them for every single animal and make it an enormous fee, which is what we were looking to do, this will put a lien on the house, but it doesn't get rid of the animals. The best thing to do, and if you look at wildlife populations in Africa and elephants, they end up culling them. We don't do that here. We're not going to put down cats. The county won't do it. I want no involvement in that. So the issue then goes, how do you deal with the fact that one person is far exceeding the allowable animal limit that we have? And then what do you do with them if it's against county law to pick them up and move them other places? Nobody will take a feral adult cat, except some of my neighbors who have done so for years. They fix them, they take care of them, and they calm down. That is the best we can hope for, is to trap them, hold on to them, and try and rehome them. And we can work with David, with different agencies, and try the best we can to do that. But the most we can do is fine usually homesteaded properties. Usually. And it doesn't solve the problem. So I pulled the ordinance because I also didn't like it. Because what I was attempting to do was make it so that people understood that it is not in their best interest to feed cats and have them breed uncontrollably. And I lived on South Beach and ran into this problem, and a friend of mine literally spent $50,000 rehoming thousands of cats to barns up in Massachusetts. They literally picked them up and moved them legally. This is a problem that is a national problem. I don't know if we can solve it. I do understand that Commissioner's Bill's intent was to help with the aesthetic component of it, and that was his intent on this. It is a complex issue. I have asked to meet with the county to see what they suggest. I have asked to see what we could do to try and help out some of our homeowners who don't seem to understand what they're creating and have created for the last 5 years. I can't say I can solve the problem tonight, but I will tell you, without licensing of cats, And without having a program that's well-funded, I don't see us being able to solve it here tonight. And that is part of the problem. What I'd like to see is a program that has been implemented in Hollandale. It's been implemented by Cat Network and other networks where they literally trap the cats, and if they can, relocate them and rehome them, remove as many kittens as possible, and then they do find the homeowners who are doing this. So I would like to come back and look at a way to attempt at least to put some deterrent in place fiscally that says, please stop doing this. Because having a law on the books that say you can only have 4 combined pets, and then yet we can't do anything about it with the animals once they have too many of them, really is not a helpful law. Thank you for listening. Do you have a comment as well?
Yeah. I did look at the county ordinances for some guidance, and they have a lot about dogs. They have a lot about irresponsible dog owners, but very little to do with cats. And I have done research myself on it. It's very, very difficult to find any jurisdiction that will address it, and even then, they're not able to address it effectively.
The only thing they do require, if I may, is a rabies shot. They do require, if you own the cat, to give a rabies shot, but then the problem is nobody can say who owns the cats. And then there's no way to mark a cat for being rabied, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? They clip the ears and to the 10 hours with the rabies. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Go ahead.
But that's a renewable thing. You have to continue with your shots, and so right. Yeah. So yeah, it is a very difficult thing to address. We try to do it with this limitation on cats and dogs, and also moving that into an administrative citation when someone's feeding more than 4 animals. But it's really hard to catch people in the act because it usually occurs early in the morning, late at night when staff's not available. And with what we had already about the limitation of dogs and cats and open feeding, it doesn't necessarily, there are people who go and feed people in the medians or just not on their block. There's one person I've been told who goes up to 125th Street, a resident of ours, that feeds cats out there. And so they're not connected to their property, but they're just building on the problem by their activities. Unfortunately, and I understand Commissioner Bill, I know, Harvey, you brought this with the best of intentions. This takes us, I think, farther away from where we want to go, and so I can't support it.
One final word. All this says is you can't feed animals in your front yard. It does not address the number of animals. It's not listed in here. It's not a wherewithal to take care of feral cats. It's to make the neighborhood look better. As of now, people can feed them wherever they want to. You want to feed them in the front yard? Feed them in the front yard. You want to feed them in the median? Feed them in the median. All this was addressing was not the feral cat problem, not the dog problem. It was to get the front yards to look a little bit nicer. People have decided to read into this stuff that's not here. This was only addressing all of the plates on the front yards, and that was it. There are other issues, but this only addresses the front yards. And as far as giving your dog a treat, give me a break. You walk around the neighborhood, you give a dog a treat, that's not feeding.
Well, you know how the environment is sometime in Biscayne Park. Historically, if you give somebody an inch, they'll use it against you if they can. And so what you don't want to do is, I feel that this can end up creating that confusion. And then all of a sudden, now we have an administration that's going to have to go address this resident who has an issue with their neighbor is walking their dog and is giving the dog some treats. Oh, no, now this is in violation of the ordinance. Now you got to deal with this stuff. And I think instead of dealing with that, I think the biggest problem is, you know, the feral cats, the stray and feral cats. I don't think, you know, I understand what your intentions were, but just from the way this is worded here, I just.
Might I? Go ahead.
So when we spoke about this back in February, I got the sense that a majority of the commission was in favor of no open feeding. If we were going to do it, that this would be a half measure, and if we said no open feeding, possibly that would be a stronger way of making an impact. I don't know how difficult that would be to enforce, as we see enforcing feeding 4 animals is difficult to do, so.
Here's the dilemma, and I went through this. I think the attorney and I can say that we spoke about this. Here's the dilemma. You've now fed a bunch of cats, and technically you admit that you own them. We can fine you for having too many, but we can't really rehome them. So then you tell them to starve them to death because you can't open feed. Taking Commissioner Bill's side on this, okay, if you want them, feed them in the back, so at least we're not having to look at them, and the animals will, in theory, stay more in the back than they will in the front all over everybody else's yard. The problem with feral cats is they don't exist that way. They go around the neighborhood, they have territories, they have different ways of doing things, and that's not how feral cats operate. Home pets will operate that way. If you have a pet that's tame, it'll stay in your yard. My cat does, it stays in my yard, it doesn't go out, unless I leave the gate open accidentally, but it stays in my yard. So to me, there are 4 or 5 homeowners that are significantly creating this problem, which are now having their neighbors involved in it because now they don't want to see cats starving to death. I think the issue we have to take on, and I'm making a suggestion that we postpone this until we can look at a complete situation that's dealing with feral cats. To me, the harboring of strays was my attempt to do that, but then when I looked at my ordinance, and after speaking with people who have better expertise than I do in the licensings of cats and how you have to deal with that, and what the county will or will not do. Because the ultimate issue is we can have a law in the books that says, no, you can't do this. But if we don't have a way to get the cats out of here or rehomed or relocated, we might want to try something a little simpler first. And that is work with David Raymond to get TNRs on a regular basis here. Trap as many young cats as we can and have them rehomed. We can then try and see what we can do after the trapping to see if people will take some of these cats in, even if they're feral, and try and deal with them and adopt them out, and use agencies such as Cat Network and so forth to help us with that procedure to minimize the population. And then go through the last tier to me is having an education plan to our communities, especially to those individuals who we know are breeding the cats. And we can put a fine associated with it once they've signed off and doing all this if they continue doing it. So to me, it's an implementation issue from almost an administrative with the county's help, because we don't have the resources to do this. To me, that's a better approach, at least initially, to solve it. As far as the plates on the outside, I'm going to defer to the manager and the code enforcement officer. Have you talked to the code enforcement officer regarding the plates and whether or not we have an issue?
That would fall under the unsightly objects, that sort of thing.
So can we find them anyway if there's unsightly objects in the front? And can we use that code as opposed to having a separate code to take care of that issue?
I will have to double check that. I think we could. And so, I mean, it depends if it's a pretty plate or an ugly plate and where it's located. I mean, it starts to get very, subjective there as well. And so, if it...
In 11 years, we never have.
I know.
And we also have never really, and that's, as long as I've been here, the individuals that are a part of the cat breeding situation that I know next to my street, I've tried year after year to get somebody to try and assist with that, and we really haven't had a lot of success. So until the TNR program, and that's been the best program we've had so far.
Just if I may, to add on that, I think it would be great to regularly have those come out here. But I also think that you have a significant impact when you have someone like the Cat Network come in and do the spay and neuter on site, because they can go, while they're here, are trained to go out to those sites where people are, they're cat hoarders, I suppose you call them, and they know how to speak to these people. And we had success when we had Cat Network here. We partnered with Sally Heyman to do the spay and neuter at the rec center and in their truck, in having people bring out, just that day. They didn't make an appointment before, but that day they were convinced to bring out 4, 5, 6 of their cats and have them spayed and neutered.
And I think that's helpful, especially for cats that they can capture and they hold. I think part of the challenge is some of these more feral cats where they're not gonna, they just don't walk into a trap and say, come on, come into my carrier. So I do think we have to do both programs. I agree with you that anything we can do to help spade and neuter animals as quickly as possible so they don't breed is important. I want to kind of leave this in your ballpark as to what you...
I'm going to leave it I want it for a vote. Either vote it up or vote it down. It's my thought was very simple. It has been 5 months. We spent money on this. It's gone back and forth. It was a basic, simple thought. And all it actually said was you couldn't feed them in your front yard, and we spent money with the attorneys, having it rewritten numerous times. Again, it was just so just makes it look a little bit nicer in the park. It wasn't controlling, it wasn't anything else, it was a really simple thing, and we spent 5 months on it. Vote it up, vote it down. That's all it
Need a
is.
motion?
I'd like to make a motion, but may I just have one clarification from the attorney? It says no person shall feed any animal outdoors. I thought we had changed that to specify.
According to the minutes of the meeting, which I drafted this off of, the minutes of the meeting said it was animals, not dogs or cats, or specified any particular animal. So I drafted it based upon the minutes, since that was the official direction of the commission. This ordinance was drafted based upon the minutes and the direction of the commission.
My issue is with the animal outdoors. I happen to concur that this is too broad, unfortunately, as it's currently written.
Actually, that's not the way it was drafted. The way it was,
The minutes stated animals.
it said animals, it didn't say outdoors. You could feed your animals in your backyard. It didn't say you had to feed all your animals inside. But it's not going to pass anyway. But it didn't say you had to feed all your animals inside. A lot of people don't, so.
Okay, is there a motion?
I make a motion.
Is there a second? In honor of you, I will second it.
Okay.
Because it's an ordinance, we have to take a vote. So, Madam Clerk, roll call for the vote.
Mayor Trucman,
Unfortunately, because of the way it's worded, no.
Vice Mayor Tudor,
No.
Commissioner Butte,
Yes.
Commissioner Ross,
No.
Motion fails 1 to 3. Attorney Dunkiel, ordinance 2018-04.
Yes, this is ordinance number 2018-04, an ordinance of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, authorize the borrowing of money for the refinancing of an existing loan in the amount not to exceed $297,000, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for an effective date. This is a request to pass and adopt, set second reading for August 7th, 2018.
Manager Manners, could you please just go ahead and give a description since this is your item?
Absolutely. Florida Community Bank has offered to refinance the loan that we took out to restore the log cabin 3 years ago. It's currently with City National Bank. The interest rate there is 4.25%. Florida Community Bank is offering it for 4.05%. And so that would save us a little bit of money. We'd originally talked about this, and we talked about starting to move banks, but unfortunately, the interest rates had gone up by the time we'd finished the 2016 audit, which was required to get this approved. As soon as we had the audit done, we got this, and we do have the 4.05% rate locked in through August, if the commission decides to move forward with it. It won't save us a lot in interest at this point, but it will free up the $220,000 that we do have in the control account. Now, my understanding is the original agreement with City National Bank said that we could go in and use that $220,000 from that account. I believe that was changed. Remember when I came in last year, we were in default on that loan, and we had to scramble really quickly to get that control account funded and so forth. And so another resolution was done at that point. And I just looked up that resolution today. I haven't been able to find the new agreement with City National from then to see what was changed, and if that was where we all got the idea that we were locked into the $220,000 and couldn't touch it. But I do want to find out for sure on that. Either way, by consolidating it, moving it over to FCB, we're still going to save a few $1,000s.
About $5,000?
It'll be about $5,000. It isn't much, but there'll be a little bit of savings. It will free up that money. We will have easier for staff, and it does save the village a few dollars.
Thank you. Any comments?
No.
Comments? Commissioner Bilton, any comments?
Yeah, I guess my question is, and I think so with this bank, there's no prepayment. I believe with the old bank, there was a prepayment penalty.
There was a prepayment. It was, I believe, over in 3 years, it was a graduate payment. So I think now if we pay off the loan now, there's no prepayment.
There's no prepayment, so we can get out of that loan. Fine, okay. That's
Thank you. Commissioner Ross?
Yeah, I have several questions about it. Thank you. My first question is, what was this ordinance drafted by the attorney?
I apologize. We did skip public comments. So what I'd like to do, if it's all right with the attorney, if this is not going to bother procedures, let Commissioner Ross finish her statement, then we'll open up for public comments. Commissioner Ross?
I did review it.
I'm sorry, but you didn't draft it.
I did not draft it, but I did review it. And I also did make changes to it.
Okay, because some emotive language in the ordinance that really doesn't have any place in the legislature. When it says, whereas there's no debt service account required, and on this financing, 0.5% tax will be freed of captivity and earn interest.
That was not drafted by me. I reviewed it for legal sufficiency. I did not do editorial comments like that.
Okay, so to go to that point, freed from captivity, there's been a lot of talk about how the original financing tied up off all of the half-penny tax that comes from the state, and that might have been the case where we had the situation that the control account had not been funded by the prior finance group. But once the amendment was made in May of 17 and the control account was funded, we were no longer in default. And that was at Resolution 2017-33. The only thing the amendment does is that it changes the number of the account number of the control account. And I have a copy of it here, if, Andrew, if you'd like to see it. This is the amendment. I'm not sure where it got started, that $220 some odd thousand was being held captive by City National Bank. To me, it made absolutely no sense whatsoever, because that account was approaching the actual payoff amount of the balance of the loan. And so I read it again and again and again, and I went back into my emails and I found an email from June 2017, which I'll share copies with everyone, where village attorney Andrew Hearn was asked the question, I'm sorry, John Hearn. That was John Hearn.
Unless he's adopted you recently.
John Hearn was asked the question on June 6, 2017. I wrote to John and I pointed him to the documents where the control agreement near the bottom of the first page says, borrower shall have the right to access and withdraw any and all funds in the control account which are in excess of the held monthly amount. It then seemed to me that as long as we maintained $2,700 monthly, which was the amount that was required to be in that control account, we would be able to sweep the balance and use it as we saw fit, whether it be putting it in an interest-bearing account or using it for operating expenses. And so we went back and forth. The question came up exactly because of that amendment to the control agreement last June. And so we went back and forth, and John wrote back, I agree with Commissioner Ross's assessment, although we must initially deposit the half-cent sales tax proceeds into the control account, we can withdraw any and all funds above $2,700 per the language of the control agreement. And the manager gave John the contact information for the bank at City National. John wrote back, he just spoke with Lewis and confirmed that anything in excess of the money held, $2,700 in control account can be withdrawn. The manager writes back, excellent, many thanks. This message, I don't know, was buried, it just disappeared. It disappeared from my memory too, actually. I have to confess to that. But it just went against anything in any business judgment to tie up all of your money in almost in excess of what the loan balance is. And so for that reason, I won't say every month, but whenever we talk about this, I say, no, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And so I went back and found the answer last June. John gave it to us. The amendment does nothing to change this. In fact, this discussion was had at the time the resolution for the amendment was being reviewed. And so I still don't understand why we're pursuing a refinancing that purportedly might save us $5,100. And although there is no loan commitment fee with the new bank, the loan commitment letter that's attached to the resolution says there's no loan commitment fee, but the village is responsible for all legal and out-of-pocket expenses associated with the proposed financing. The bank will be represented by Greenspoon Martyr Law. So in addition to expending resources of our village attorney to review the documents, we will have to reimburse the bank for their attorney's fees in preparing the documents. I can't imagine, working at a law firm myself, $5,000 is very easily incurred when you walk in the door. So I'm trying to understand why we're doing this. It doesn't really make sense.
Commissioner.
Based on the idea that, that's been my understanding, and I did not recall that email that you provided, but based on the understanding that we were not allowed to utilize the money that we had funded the control account with. And so if I misunderstood that, my apologies. But that was what I was doing before. Paul, do you know for sure?
Yeah, it's a little blurry right now what you're all talking about. $2,700 a month.
If you could come to the podium, and then I'm going to open up for public comments after they're finished, okay?
Yeah, the initial direction we received from the prior finance director was that you had to maintain the $220,000, which was the equivalent of $3,000 a month or so, and that once it reached the 220, any more than that would be available. So that's I looked quickly at the last 2 years, the financials. That was the controlling amount that was left in there, and it's basically held.
Okay, before you
I saw
go,
your memo. Yeah,
I'm
that's
gonna-
news to me. So
You have a copy of our attorney's
yeah, that wasn't the
opinion on that?
direction I was given. So
Okay, so that was June of last year. It was clarified, and the information's there. Obviously, it didn't make its way to you, but the prior finance director was included in this email all the way through.
yeah, so just from my position, there's two issues. One is it was the understanding of staff to operate this way, and two, the banking relationship with the new bank was the impetus, was to have banking relationships where there were less restrictions on all prospects, different lines of credit, better interest rates. This was one of several. So I don't know the banking package in the details, but I can just tell you that the new bank and the new arrangement was a positive move forward.
So if the impetus to move banks was to restructure this loan because someone was under a miscomprehension of the loan documents, and then it was clarified by our attorney, is there still a reason why we should move forward?
I said it in a general sense that all of the banking relationships were better with the newer bank. You could see that clearly they were offering better interest, et cetera,
Great.
better flexibility. So this was one of the components. If it was inaccurate, that's news to me, and that's great. But my understanding was that the new bank is much more flexible and has better interest for the city, rather than this structure of this loan was unbelievable.
So now knowing, I'm sorry, the structure that was the way it was conveyed to you.
Right, yeah, I was shocked.
You were shocked by
Yes.
it. I mean, I was so angry at the people who got us into the loan, thinking that that was it, until I pulled out the documents and I understood that they got it wrong.
Right.
One of our prior finance people, I suppose, I don't know. I couldn't believe that our attorney would have let us enter into a loan that way, on those terms. And obviously, he didn't.
I was really happy that you were moving out of it, yes.
No one asked John until last June, I suppose, to clarify it. But, you know, I've talked about it again and again and again. I felt like I was beating my head against the wall. And then finally, we got the answer from John. I went on to other things. Everybody was copied on it. Still,
You say everybody.
The
Who are you referring
situation-
to, everybody?
well, sorry, the
Thank
administration,
you.
the finance people, the manager, the attorney made it clear for everyone. And still, I don't understand why we're pursuing this supposedly to save $5,100. We don't know what the closing costs are going to be. We don't know what the bank's fees are going
Yeah,
to be.
I'm still not clear on the email, because it does say a monthly amount has to be retained of $2,700. So I don't know what that means. Does it mean, if you take $2,700 times 12
Have you seen the
months,
loan document?
No, I've not.
Okay, well, I'm not going to ask you to interpret it, but I can give you the ordinance and copies of it. I'm surprised that you don't have copies of it.
Not with me, no.
And so aside from the mortgage and the security agreement, there's a control account.
Right.
And that's where all of the half-penny tax goes in. And of that amount, the bank sweeps twice a year. But they require, which $2,700 is basically the monthly payment. They require that monthly amount to be maintained in that account until they sweep every 6 months.
So to me,
Everything above that obligation,
well, yeah, so I think that might be the point that's misunderstood. This time last year and as of today, there's no more than that $220,000 left in that account, but it's still holding $220,000 of cash that you can't use.
yes, you can. No, you're not understanding.
No, you can't tap it. It's sitting in that account. You can't use it for any other means.
a control
If you-
account.
If you were to go below it, you would be in violation.
Did you
It's
read
above
John's
it.
email?
I'm reading it right now. Yeah. It says held
may
monthly.
I make a
amount,
suggestion so
$2,700.
we
If they're
can-
sweeping that and you go below it, you would be in violation. That's how it's
That
interpreted.
means 2,700 times 6,
It says monthly.
2,700 times 6, because the payment is swept twice a month,
Okay.
twice a year.
All right. I would take that as a year, but if. I
Well,
understand.
even if
Yeah.
it were a year, then we're talking about $27,000,
Right.
$30,000. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 is the annual obligation for the note.
Can you, if you
I guess we're
can,
talking about I don't understand then.
if we can possibly try and finish your comments, if you may, please, so we can have
I
public
don't
comments.
see how there's a savings. I think that we should pull out of this control account all of the funds that are not obligated to be there
That'd be great. Yep.
and invest it as we should have done a year ago, as we should have done last June. Put it into an interest-bearing account, and stop saying that the funds are being held captive or that we have any restriction, because we do not.
I agree with Commissioner Ross.
Well, hold on one second. I apologize. I'm going to open up because we did not do so. Let's open up for public comments, then we can continue on this discussion. Thank you. Public comments? I
Started talking about it. It's kind of weird now. We're going to.
excuse me, public comments. I run the meeting. Thank you.
11166. Rox covered most of my comments. The one thing I was going to say, though, more importantly, is before you enter into this type of consideration of an ordinance, you should do a cost-benefit analysis. And as was pointed out, there are costs to refinance. And to save $5,100 over, I believe it's 12 years, in light of upfront costs that you might have to put in to refinance, doesn't make any sense, probably. I don't know what it is, because I don't believe a cost-benefit analysis was done. But I'm going to suspect that it's very close. And I agree 100% that the total amount that is to be withheld in that control account is $2,700 a month, up to 6 months. You pay them, and then you start it all over again, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay.
Okay, as I
Commissioner
said,
Bilt.
I agree with Commissioner Ross. I guess two things we need to do. First thing is, let's contact that bank and see the way they're looking at it. If in fact they say, I know what it says there, but they may say, oh, no, we look at it this way, your attorney is incorrect.
No, but the guy confirmed with John in the email. The
But
bank
Please allow,
officer.
please allow him to
The email
finish.
comes from
The bank
the
officer.
bank officer. I prefer to see something on their letterhead so we know it's so. Next thing I would go is to the new bank and say, hey, we're not in the same situation. If you in fact waive all fees, and just so we have all of our money in one account, in one bank, and make it easier, and it doesn't cost us any money up front, then that's another way to look at it. Because you're paying nothing up front, you're maintaining everything with one bank, and we have an idea. So then you're actually being able to compare apples and apples, see what it is dollar-wise. Of course, Chuck is right, a cost-benefit analysis.
Commissioner Tudor?
I mean, we could go back and forth on this tonight. It sounds like we're at a point where it's probably better to set this aside, come back next month, and we can address it there at that time. We can get the information. We may want to actually get the information directly. I agree with Commissioner Bilt, information directly from whoever the bank contact was, because I know in this email chain it's just Attorney Hearn who's saying that he spoke to Lewis at the bank. So, you know, if we want to go ahead and actually reach out to the bank, get something actually from the bank themselves, identifying how they see this account. I'm not saying that I don't necessarily believe Attorney Hearn, but I know when you get into these type of little legal matters, sometimes things may be not from his point, but from the individual he's speaking to at the bank may have presented it a way that was not actually correct, that their legal department would agree with. So I think, you know, Commissioner Ross makes some very good points, so I think it's probably better to pull this now and then come back next month on this.
I have one question for you to make sure we're on the same page. Interest rates are going up, so I do want to
They
make
are.
one thing. This is for us to make sure one way or the decision tonight. My question is, if there are closing costs that we're unaware of that are not disclosed in this, it makes it difficult to vote on. So the implication is that there's costs in here that we don't see, which would offset the 5,000. That's one comment that's been made. So if you have a clarification on that, let us know. I assumed that the 5,000 was after all costs were made.
Yeah, no, that would probably consume the cost. I mean, the real benefit of doing this would be to free up the $220,000. However, if we don't need to do this to free that up, we can continue just as we are. quite
Okay,
frankly.
then, or look for
And
another
so-
deal somewhere else.
Yeah.
The other question I had is, so that we're all clear on this, if we postpone it, we will definitely, that might make a moot point anyway, because the interest rates may increase somewhat,
If,
incrementally.
okay, we have another commission meeting tomorrow night. Would it be possible, if I can get an answer tomorrow, to bring this up tomorrow night after we've discussed the attorneys?
If you
Or-
can find, I think we should have a consensus here that there seems to be some discrepancy on the cost-benefit analysis of which is more beneficial. If, it depends on, I don't know, if GMS can, Mr. Winklejohn, if you would please?
Yes, ma'am.
If you could work on this to make, what I'm trying to make sure is, at the end of the day, all of us, the whole purpose of doing this is to save money and to allow access to funds so that we're not holding money on.
Absolutely.
Because I was also informed of two different numbers. I heard the 27,000 a while back, but then I was told we couldn't touch the account. And also tying it to a deposit is also, I'm not even sure statutorily, that seemed a bit problematic to me. I have not heard municipalities being forced to do that. I don't know. That seemed a bit awkward to me. That's what I didn't like about the loan. But I'm at the same position as everybody here. I
Right,
think
when
Commissioner
I-
Ross brought in some really
When
good
we
points.
first saw the account, we said, let's just pay that off and get rid of it. That was the first advice, we suggested.
I recall, yeah.
I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So happy to get into the detail, and if we need to continue the loan, we'll do it, and we'll get the best deal we can.
The other issue was, I didn't like the idea that they penalized us, because I remember when that was being voted on, and I wasn't a commissioner at the time, but I remember there was a payoff situation where you couldn't pay it off early.
Yeah, prepayment.
And I didn't
of
like
some
that
kind.
either. That was
Yeah,
another piece.
my instinct with bankers is we're the customer, not them. So,
So this particular, if we switch to this one, in theory, we wouldn't have that issue. We could pay it off anytime we want to, correct?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the type of environment I would recommend for you.
So that's a better environment right now. if
Yeah,
we
whether you
chose to
need a
do that.
loan from them today or not, but in the future, it's just, it's the right business relationship.
Yeah, so if we have the money, we can pay it off, we can get rid of the loan early and not be penalized, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yep.
Would you be, so if we have a consensus here, would anybody object to, if it doesn't violate with the ordinance, to come back and get answers on it and then have a decision we could bring tomorrow? Would that be sufficient time, or would that create an issue? Because it is a special meeting, we did not advertise it, that is my concern.
There may be an issue with it. The best thing is if the commission is considering moving forward to approve it at first reading. However,
get it later.
you let it come back August 7th for second reading, and if the answer's not what you want it to be, then you can vote it down. But at least it gives you time to send it back, let the manager see what's going on, because, I mean, get 1 day is cutting it close. If you have no answers by tomorrow, close the business, you're missing out on a whole nother month to get it. And then, because these take 2 readings, so now you're looking at September to approve the ordinance, if it does come back favorable.
So if we vote it up now, we can turn around and vote it down
Correct.
with insufficiency.
Correct, you can. You can vote it down August during second reading after it's been advertised and said we don't want to move forward with this.
I have an
Commissioner-
issue with that. When you're ready, I'll give my comment.
Please go ahead.
So the ordinance on its face says something that is not true. It says that those funds are being held captive. And I just showed the attorney the control agreement. I think he agrees with what Attorney Hearn told us. I'm not willing to vote yes on something that on its face has incorrect information. It also says that there's, does it say on here that there's no cost, or is that just in the email? Is that just in the introductory memo? Aside from that, our charter at section 4.10B requires a feasibility study when we're going to borrow money. And although there was a feasibility study conducted back in 15, there's been a change, as our finance people will tell us, there's been a change in our finances, and I think that it merits a new study, not just a conclusory statement saying that it's good. We rely on the old
May I ask for
feasibility
clarification from you on that? So you want a new feasibility study as to whether or not we need to take out the loan at all? Or to pay it off after we paid $1 million in costs for the storm?
What the charter requires is a feasibility study that the city has the funds to repay the loan. That's what's required in the charter. I didn't make it up.
I'm not asking.
But the payment on the loan would be actually less by $200 a month in installments than what we're currently paying.
But our financial condition may have changed since that original feasibility study, so we need a restatement of how the monies are going to be paid off.
So you're, Attorney Dunkeel, would you weigh in on that? Because that doesn't make any sense to me. We'd have to do the same study on a loan we already have, that we're trying to get a better rate on. I don't understand.
So 4.10 says the commission shall not borrow funds unless, say, it's approved by 4 commissioners. B, provided the commission has first received and approved a feasibility study from the manager concluding that sufficient revenues are available to repay the indebtedness, and C, that funds are borrowed for a valid public purpose. Obviously, I think C is met with B. If the commission has not yet received and approved a feasibility study from the manager saying that there's sufficient revenues, then in that case, 4.10 has not been satisfied. However, because the money's already indebted and there already has been a feasibility study, I believe it can be used for this, the previous one. However, Commissioner Ross also does make a good point that the financial position has changed. But I would defer to the finance director to see if it would be significant enough warranting an additional feasibility.
Then you have to pay for that expenditure.
Correct.
Well, it's just an analysis prepared by the manager that's presented to the commission. That's how we did it before. The finance director did an analysis, it was approved by the manager, and the numbers were there before us. It wasn't just a conclusory statement saying, yeah, the money, yeah, we could pay it back.
Right.
and it's a refinance.
What kind of time frame would you need to do that?
Well, certainly by your August meeting, that wouldn't be a problem. So first reading and have everything, all these questions resolved, and it goes away if it's no longer a necessary request, and you would have we could certainly show you how you're paying for it.
Then I have a question for the manager because of the interest rate issue, because this will be a moot point if the interest rates go up.
Well, it will. I mean,
And what, the lock is until when?
the lock is through August, I want to say August 10th. I can verify that. I think he gave us a few days after the next commission meeting to lock in the.
So the only thing we could do is call a special meeting for that if we need that rate.
Yeah.
Or we have to vote it up tonight and then vote it down.
Yeah.
But based upon what you're saying, at this point, we don't have the feasibility study, so we might be in violation of the charter. Is that correct?
What it comes down to is the feasibility study is not defined within the charter. It could be the manager or finance director saying, the money's already indebted, we have the money to pay it. The study could be something more in-depth. Really, ultimately, what it comes down to is the courts will always defer to the administrative agency, in this case the cities, on their interpretation of the charter and their laws, so long as it's not arbitrary or unreasonable. So with that said, if the commission is willing to accept the report of the manager and the finance director as a feasibility study, then in that case, I believe a court would defer to the village commission if what they've said tonight, because a study doesn't need to be paper, it could also be an oral report. That's a decision for the commission to determine whether or not that has been satisfied here tonight.
Okay, so we need a consensus here on how to move forward. So does everybody concur that we need some hard numbers here to make a decision? I think we're all in concurrence that we need some hard numbers to make decisions, correct?
Yeah, I think we are maybe, the first step is let's find out what the old account actually is. In fact, if we're required to keep all that money in there. And B, then we need to find out whether or not the new bank would in fact be willing to wipe out any fees. The new bank may not be willing to wipe out any fees. The old bank may say, no, you can wipe the other money out, only keep $2,700 a month in. We're done. We don't have to do anything else.
27,000, I think.
But $27,000 a month. So we're done, right?
2,700 a month.
2,700 a month only, but for 6
thought it was
months it's free, so you have to hold in.
Yeah, so,
Right.
yeah, but it's
Whatever amount of
still,
time
it's
is,
still $2,700 a month. Whether it be 1 month or 6 months, it's $2,700
It's
a
not
month.
200, it's not 200,000,
Yeah, so in
200,000
fact,
K,
if we
according to
find that
what's
out and
in.
so, we don't have to go through anything else. We don't have to do anything else. We can keep the money in there. And that may very well take care of anything else.
Can we pay off the loan? Here's the question. Can we pay off the loan if we have the money early in this
Yes.
account? No. Hold on. In this particular one, I'm asking the manager a
After 3
question.
years, it was no longer a valid thing of prepayment penalty.
Okay.
believe that's
I
what
just
it
want to
said.
confirm that. Yes?
Right, so yeah, let's find out what the bank's attitude is about it, get it in writing, and if it's the same, and the new bank is not willing to do they take care of all the fees, now at least we have some sort of an idea. And then we can decide what to do. And then probably, if we really need to, it's fine. So we hold a meeting the 1st of August, we hold our second meeting August 8th. And then we'll know. Does that make sense?
I think
Okay,
our regular commission meeting is going to be,
August 7th.
7.
okay, but somewhere between
Right.
now and August 7th, we're going to have to set the trim, because August 7th may be 2 days after the deadline at the county to give them a trim number.
Okay.
So we are going to have a special meeting
Anyway, so we can do it then.
somewhere between then and there.
So how about this? We will hold a special meeting when we're doing our trim anyway. We'll add this into that piece to make sure within the deadline of the August date for the loan, until you negotiate and figure out the financial and come back with a more clarifications that were addressed by all the commissioners. Is that acceptable to everybody?
Question is if we can sweep this $220,000, then there's no question. Realistically, we should leave it where it is. And
That's a good choice for the commission to give direction.
Okay, and so I'm just trying to make sure we have all bases covered here timeline-wise. So at this point, would you come back and let us know where we are and what your new recommendations are based upon the information that was provided to you this evening?
Mayor, one other thing as well, since this is an ordinance, it will need to be advertised. before August 7th, so the decision's going to have to be made for second reading, so that way they can advertise if it is not voted up or down today.
Yes, and that cost will be incurred.
Right, for advertising the ordinance.
Correct.
But it's also just, because as a timing aspect, you have to get it in.
Okay.
But it's got to be advertised for a special meeting,
For the special meeting.
not the August 7th meeting.
For second reading, you have to advertise.
Okay, okay.
So, I mean, this is first reading here tonight, but if you're going to defer it to a date certain, then what you're going to have to do at that one is make sure that the special meeting is, I believe we have to get it advertised in at least 10 days before the meeting. So with that said, you have to make sure there's enough time to actually advertise it, and it can't be like the 10th day. You actually need to get it in like 4 or 5 days before you intend to run it.
Okay, so then if we may go ahead, if there's no objection, I'd like to move up the trim notice to release for, in terms of a date that we can pick for the trim notice. So we have both of those on, and we can do that right now with this ordinance. So we have a date for the trim. Would that make sense?
Well, I thought we were going to talk about the trim later.
I
in
know,
the
I'm just,
agenda.
I realize, but since we have to pick a date for the trim to do a special meeting, do we not? Isn't that what you just stated, Commissioner Roth?
Yes.
Okay, since we
But
have to pick,
I also, I mean.
we're going to still discuss it. I just want to make sure we pick a date for this and that at the same time. So we can make sure we can move off on this item. So if there's no further objection, I'd like to go ahead and find some dates for us to all agree for the special meeting for the trim and for first reading of this ordinance. Or not, depending on what information is brought back forth during the special meeting.
I think we need to know from the finance director when he'll be ready to present a recommendation.
Yeah, I just grabbed my calendar.
That's-
I
yeah.
was going to recommend the Tuesday, the 24th of July,
I am not available that date, I'm sorry.
Monday.
Not till the 26th or 7th.
I'm back on the, late on the 27th.
30th.
That's fine. 30th is fine, that's Monday the 30th. Are we all available that date? And can you reach out to Commissioner Johnson-Sordell and confirm as well?
If we need to advertise it 10 days before our regular commission meeting, which is the 7th, right?
No, but this one, if we're going to do this again as a first reading, it still has to be re-advertised as a first reading, so that would have to be by the 16th. That would give him,
No, it's not. This is, first readings are not advertised. It's only the second.
I'm sorry. Yeah, right, I'm sorry. Right.
So the second reading is the,
Mayor, we need
is the 7th.
at least 5 days prior to the
So
10
that
days.
doesn't give us 10
to,
days to
Apply
advertise.
for the advertisement.
Okay, plus you need another 5 days.
At least 15 days.
Madam Clerk, go ahead. Say that. Say it aloud so everybody can hear it again.
Yeah, we're gonna need, besides the 10 days, we're gonna need 5 more days at least for the advertisement to be posted. So
15 days.
it's gonna be at least 15 days.
I mean, perhaps removing the handcuffs of trying to tie this to our trim timing, the second reading could be whenever, within the restraints of trying to negotiate the, hey, don't raise the rate, like, they could probably,
They
we
could
could probably
change the
talk
rates.
that a little bit in. I wouldn't let that be the hard thinking.
Okay, so are we still working for the 30th then, or no?
I don't think you're able to do this timing-wise. You would have to be, we can,
23rd, week of the 23rd, or earlier.
No can do.
you would have to do it the 23rd or the 24th in order to get the ad to the paper in time.
I won't, I'm not available that week.
Yeah, and I'm saying don't worry about the 7th of August.
Right, you're
as-
saying no, we're about the 7th.
Because that's the goal of getting the second reading on the refi was just to keep the locked-in rate. And I wouldn't be as concerned about that. I think you can.
It's probably not going to, you're right, because it's probably not going to move for another couple months anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's. can we
And
do
I'm
the-
putting my dollar bet behind Commissioner Ross that she's right. So she's going to
Thank
win.
you.
Okay, so we'll leave it
Can
on.
we find out by the end of this week, by the beginning
I'm
of
gonna
next week? And this way
call
we
tomorrow
can
morning.
go
Yeah,
and
I
make
mean-
life a lot easier, take a lot of pressure off everybody.
Yeah, no, I think this could be clarified quickly, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, so we all have a consensus to postpone
Yes.
the ordinance, or do you
Well-
want to vote it down?
Does that work, Attorney Dunkiel? If we have an answer tomorrow night from the banker?
It depends how the special meeting for tomorrow night has been set, if it's for a limited topic. But if it just is a special meeting of the village commission and it's pretty open, you should be able to put the item on the agenda and then approve it. Now, tomorrow night though, if they do not, you should even be able to walk it on, so long as this is general special meeting. But if it's not approved tomorrow night, or it's not voted on tomorrow night, you're probably not going to be able to get a chance to bring it up for a second hearing at August 7th.
I anticipate what will happen is tomorrow we'll have a report from the administration as to what the bank's position is. And with the confidence of our finance director in my reading and Attorney Hearn's recommendation.
We'll probably
I think
leave it where it
the
is.
answer is going to be what?
We'll leave it where it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can discuss it tomorrow as an
So
open
it's not going
item.
to be like a first reading of an ordinance, it's going to be an ordinance, it's going to be recommendation back.
Okay,
So if what you're going to do is you are going to, this is first reading. You can continue the item to a date certain, which would be tomorrow night. And that's what you would have to do. So it'd keep the item alive, and then tomorrow you'd revisit it, and then you can vote it up or vote it down tomorrow after the board.
okay.
So you need a motion to continue to a date certain of July 11th through 28th.
Do I have a motion certain to continue to this ordinance to tomorrow, July 11th?
I so move.
Is there a second? I'll second it. All those in favor? Oh, no, we have to take a vote on, do we need a vote?
You need a, yeah, you need a vote.
Okay, could you call the roll for that?
Mayor Truppen,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tudor,
Yes.
Commissioner Built,
Yes.
Commissioner Ross,
No?
Okay. All right, moving on to item,
Can we, as long as that motion now passed, can we amend the agenda for tomorrow night so that it includes the item? Thank you.
yes. Is there a motion to amend the item tomorrow to bring this back up for discussion?
If you moved it to a date certain.
Date certain, we already did it, correct?
It's already on, yeah.
Okay, thank you. No motion necessary.
So
10B,
we don't
please.
need to amend the posted agenda?
Oh, the posted agenda, that's, yeah, I mean, obviously it should be up there,
need to
but it's automatically on the agenda for tomorrow. But I see what you're saying. because you don't want-
Notice,
Yes.
first reading.
Can you make sure it's posted?
Sure.
Every word has to be posted legally to make sure we're in legal compliance.
No, we can add this item as a continuation.
Okay, thank you.
No?
Attorney Dunkiel, we're fine?
He may
Okay.
know who it is.
10B, Attorney Dunkiel. Excuse me. Thank you. If you need to have a conversation, if you could take it outside, please. Thank you.
This is Resolution 2018-17, a resolution of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, authorizing the manager to execute the professional services agreement between Calvin Giordano and Associates, Inc., and the Village of Biscayne Park for the provision of building plan review and inspection services, providing for an effective date.
Open for discussion? Actually, it's a contract, so hold on. It's a resolution. Can we open for discussion, please? And are there any comments on the contract?
I had some questions, a couple of questions.
Commissioner?
So I just want to make sure that, because I'm reading in the, and I know you've taken a lot of time with Attorney Hearn, and it's been thoroughly reviewed, gone back and forth and negotiated. My concern was where it talks about the professional fee schedule for Calvin Giordano, and they show in the attachment, it's, I have my copy made differently, so it's going to be right after the signature pages. It shows professional fee schedules,
Yes.
and their hourly rates stated there. And then the page following says, talks about the 65-35 split.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not sure, it's not clear to me what is the fee going to be, and will we be covered with doing the practice the way we have before?
Well, I think we will be covered. It was originally in our, and we've got Alex David here as well.
Alex, could you come on, because you're going to be fielding, I'm sure, several questions, so thank you so much, and if you introduce yourself on the way up, thank you.
Welcome back to the village, Alex.
So we set this up to be similar to the agreement we already have in place as far as the 65-35 split. And so this includes, our general building, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, building components on behalf of the village, and so forth. The professional fee schedule, these, I believe, are for additional things like a landscape architect, which we don't need, engineering, that sort of thing that we might need. If we do additional planning services, that would be the hourly rate for those.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Alex David with Calvin Giordano and Associates, and I'm very happy to be back in this beautiful facility because I remember the old one. The village manager is correct. The way this is set up is the RFP was for building services and also planning services. So what we felt was best is to include and negotiate the building services, which is the 65-35, but also include Calvin Giordano's standard fee schedule for the planning services. So that's why that's in there. So it's really two fee schedules, one for building, one for planning.
But the contract we're dealing with here is just for the building portions, the planning would be negotiated separately, is that correct?
Well, it's all, it was part of the RFP.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, it was one building and planning.
okay, thank you.
So one of the things that caught my eye on that fee schedule page is to talk about services performed beyond regular hours or services performed after a natural disaster, which struck me, last year when we were dealing with Hurricane Irma and leading up to Hurricane Irma, we relied very heavily on our building official to help us bring in line those properties that were under construction, make sure that they were safely maintained. And where does that fall into our fee schedule? Is that like a chargeback to?
That, I'm sorry, for the building services, the building official, if they came out for, I think that's, let me pull their fee schedule really quick. From what I understand, I mean, it's an added service and an added charge.
Okay.
So, and you're talking about additional services.
Right.
So I guess any time after the hurricane, if they had to come out, that would be the fees. And they also discussed in there, if someone wanted an inspection on a weekend, a homeowner, then there would be a fee associated with that, over and above the 65-35 split. So,
right, and then you get that charge, that
not
hourly
me
rate.
personally.
No, I'm sorry.
Empty closet, yes.
The firm gets that hourly
Correct,
rate full.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, what we did with our current building official prior to Irma this year was we needed him to go out and help us shut down construction sites, that sort of thing.
Right.
And that was all done as just part of, regular business,
Right.
during regular business hours. So I want to make sure that, with Calvin or Causley, that we have that same benefit.
Okay, what I'll do is we'll set up a meeting when this gets, if approved,
Okay.
We'll set up a meeting because you need to know the inspectors, the building official, everyone. I mean, I'd like to do a meet and greet, basically, so I think that's going to be important. Then we could discuss,
So if I could suggest also, Christian, that might be an added charge to that property owner because it's sort of a specialized service on unforeseen circumstances. So it may be, like a pass-through that we just charge out to them in the event of hurricane. And we might want to put something in our fee schedule that allows for that special service.
Okay. For prior to shut down construction sites prior to a hurricane?
If they're in violation of not doing it themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
correct?
Well,
And what-
that's the way we did it this year, yes, was if they were in violation of, we would have the building inspector just went to every major construction site, looked at it for problem areas, and helped us or helped the contractors to know, okay, that needs to be strapped down, that needs to be moved out, so forth, so the sites were safe through the hurricane.
So I think you've already added something in the construction applications when it's a major project that says you are responsible for securing the site in the event of a storm. I think
And
you
we
said
have.
you're including that.
Do you have any informational guide on that point? I mean, do you hand out something with, because I think the county has some guidelines, informational brochures or whatever that discusses what you need to do?
Right.
Okay, perfect, okay.
So in that flyer, we can have that notification that there will be charges from the building inspector to make sure that the site is secured.
We have to have that in the fee schedule, which we don't currently. So that would have to be added into the fee schedule.
Which you're revising anyway, so.
Right, right. So this would be, what we're discussing today would be copied into your fee schedule, so it's all, okay.
If I may, there's another point that is in line with this that I'm very concerned about, and that has to do with, we have had for years and years and years, when we didn't have a lot of build-out, and we had newer, when the houses were newer, we weren't remodeling like we are now. We don't have somebody who just drives around the village and checks and spots and checks. And one of the things, we have inspectors sitting in the audience here, they'll tell you that the way they catch people is they run around and occasionally will catch people doing things they're not supposed to do, pouring concrete they're not supposed to, building on old entire second editions, et cetera. We don't have the staff to do that. And one of the things I don't see in this contract is what I call a couple hours, or whatever the time frame would be to make sure we have those types of spot checks and oversight. And that's a really big concern for me, that we don't, and I don't want to leave that to our code enforcement officer to say, well, I think this is going on, but I have no expertise in pouring concrete and tie beams. I don't want them to have to do a structural walkthrough to guess, and plus they can't enter the property. So the only person who can do that is a building inspector.
Right, that's totally doable. We'll do a drive-by or spot check, in the morning when they're driving into work or when they're leaving, they could take different routes or something.
Or if we're having the biggest issue I have is major remodels and new construction.
Yes.
That is where we have by far the most issues that we have. I will be bringing forth, I've been waiting till you come on board before I could bother you, but I will hopefully be able to bring forth some of the changes we're looking at legislatively to try and minimize the impact to the neighbors and the community that are having to deal with a lot of these construction folks.
Right.
And looking forward to your expertise on how to help us with that. But I am concerned with oversight and making sure we have that periodically throughout so that you catch the folks. They know that, they're very savvy as to what days to do what.
Right.
And I want to make sure we have people that are here at any point in time to do that.
Right. I'll pass that word.
With the changes that you're requesting, this is not ready to be approved tonight, and so we may need to bring this back in August, so just be aware of it.
I understand. The other issue that I had was the same comment that Commissioner Ross had built up regarding the change in natural disaster and emergencies, or if we had a building that was structurally unsound and we had an incident where we had to have you come out,
Right.
And finding a way to deal with that so that the financial impact isn't on the village.
Right.
And the last thing I had, well, in terms of major big pieces, is the inspector. One of the things that would be helpful is if he had the ability, the manager, if he had an issue with an inspector, to be able to tell you that and then have the inspector change and have that in the language somewhere.
Right, if you don't get along with someone, we'll switch them out. That's, and there is wording in many
I just didn't see it in this contract, and I was
Right.
kind of hoping that we had that
Yeah, well, no,
put
we
in.
could get
tweak
that.
that.
in. I don't
Yeah.
see a problem with, I mean, it's in many contracts.
And then just some really small things very quick on the contract, and this is probably more for the attorney very quickly. I know the dates you'll deal with and make that less problematic, but there was a couple small things. Page 4 of 20, 7.2. I think it meant to read the Village of Biscayne Park, a duplicate certificate of insurance policy, or a copy of. I just didn't. The policy word, it just didn't read correctly to me, unless I'm misunderstanding it. It just was, it was just a readability issue, and what was intended by that, I don't want to assume a duplicate policy of certificate of insurance unless it's called a policy of a certificate of insurance.
I think there's a with missing. Does it make
Yeah, there's
sense to
something
say
missing there, I just don't know what it
duplicate
is. Once
Biscayne
again,
Park
that's,
with a duplicate policy of the certificate. So
okay,
maybe that,
it's just something to that
if
effect
you
is readable.
all agree, I think that's what's missing.
Okay. And then there was one more small one on page 7 of 20, under the default. I don't know if you meant to say the agreement or shall be compensated, or you meant to say the contractor. I'm not quite sure what was meant by that. That also has to kind of be, it starts with, in such an event, the agreement or shall be, only be compensated. Because an agreement can't be compensated. So I'm assuming that was maybe the contractor. And that's for those of you looking for it, it's in 14.0 default on page 7 of 20.
Maybe
Looks like maybe a whole line is missing there.
Something's missing there. It's definitely got some, and I didn't want to play attorney here, so I'll leave
I
it to your
think
wisdom.
If in such event the agreement, the contractor is in default, the contractor should only be compensated for any services, so.
Yeah, that was the
I think
only-
that's one thing.
Yep. And the only thing that I know we talked about briefly on the idea of putting in a number of hours, maybe under section 3.0, that's where that could go. We're talking about one line that would add spot checking or oversight, and if you wanted to put a time frame on it, however you want to word that, so that that's in there. That's where the section I thought it belonged, but once again, I'm not an attorney, so. And that's all I had. Thank you.
You know, I think there's another cleanup. On the next page, it says the agreement is effective June 11th. So whenever
Yeah.
we'll have to change
There's
that
a
date.
couple, all the dates, there's several dates, yeah. There's several June 11ths and March 2nds and things like that. I know the March 2nd is valid, but the June 11th, on page 3 of 20, I believe. Yep. And that's all the comments I had.
Anyone else? No?
Anybody else, comments?
So I just would hate to put this off for another month to August, and they sound like just nits and gnats, little things to be adjusted. If we could possibly get them done and bring this back at the next meeting, even if it's a special meeting.
This is 10 minutes.
Because we've been going through it for,
It's not.
we've been going through it for quite a while now, so I think, especially since it's hurricane season, I'd like to get it all and get it in place.
If it's in fact only just a few minutes, can we get it back tomorrow, just add it on? to the
Well,
agenda?
we'll have to work. I mean, it's your contract, so we need to, it's not our contract, it's the village's, so we'll go back and forth. But I mean, these changes are simple to do.
Minor, yeah.
Minor. Oh, you're talking about.
The only issue there would be with the draft and adopt is these are business terms that you're altering. Because right now it's a 65-35 split, and that doesn't include, and that's just for the building plan review. But now since we're adding like random inspections and things currently underneath the contract that are billed out, I believe $90 an hour, we have to actually go in and put in that it includes X amount of hours of inspection.
At no cost to the village, right?
At no cost, right, it's included within the 65. So those are
Correct.
things, there's certain business terms that are gonna have to be worked out, how much time, that sort of thing. That's why I hesitate with the draft and adopt. This is something that needs to be negotiated between the manager and the company or not.
I don't know if you can speak for, in regards to the number of hours that you could, I mean, I'm trying to find
Yeah,
a.
I'm the planning guy, so
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
building guy. So I mean, I'll have to, discuss it with MT Cosley, a bit more carefully and make sure everyone's happy with this. And I mean, these are all doable. I don't see, a problem. But I just want to make sure the wording in here is what everyone now agrees with, and.
Because I know we
we'll
have
sign it,
coming,
get back.
because the other thing we have coming up is the comprehensive plan that I know
Right.
will be,
Which we assisted years ago.
so, yeah,
So,
So we are going to have a special meeting for the trim? And
We
maybe
could do it then?
that's going to be like 2
and
weeks,
that
a
will
week or
be-
two?
We're
30th
not
of-
sure of the date yet? Quite sure. So, okay, we're around. So
If we can do that and put it that
My-
same time, that we would,
I'm on 108th and Biscayne. That's my office. So, you know, that way, yeah.
okay.
So, or which way? I forget. I forget. It's dark out now. I can't see.
So do we have a consensus just to bring it forth at that time at the trim and get these last items worked out so we can move forward with this? Okay, we have
Yes.
consensus. Thank you. Okay, item 10C, Commissioner Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
10C is proposed resolution to designate a voting delegate for the Florida League of Cities annual conference, which is to be held in August 15th through the 18th, up here in Florida, in Hollywood. They usually send a letter asking for delegates. I don't know if we've received one. I didn't see it. But the memo itself is mostly extracted from the Florida League website. I was looking to possibly get commitment from who on the commission is going to go. I intend to go myself, and I'd be happy to serve as the appointed voting delegate. It pretty much is self-explanatory, so I don't want to burn any more time on it.
Thank you. Commissioner Bilt?
Do they actually vote on stuff or not?
Yep.
Yes, every city, depending on the value, depending on your population, get a number of votes, voting cards, sort of.
Okay.
And what they vote on is basically the officers going in, and they generally are, there's like a line of succession, so whoever's
it's pretty
vice
well
president
voted,
will be
right.
president, yeah, unless there's some huge upset. And they also vote on the priorities that the league sets through its committee process, so it's not like something is going to be thrown in that is completely out of whack. It's a,
I
I know I'm not going to be able to attend.
I plan to attend. I have no problem. I'm already planning on attending.
okay.
I actually will not be here that time.
May I make a suggestion, just so in the future we don't have to do this, because I know there was a resolution I saw in 2005. I know this keeps coming up. Might I suggest that, just for clarity for future, so we're not doing this, that it gets brought up, we're going to talk about it with the goals and the calendar, but that normally speaking, have the mayor, vice mayor, and then if neither can go, some appointed representative therein, so that that's a continuous part of the village, and that's how it's done. I'm not saying that because I'm mayor, I'm saying that because I just think it would simplify things, because the mayor usually is the representative of the village.
Every year, the league usually asks for a resolution every year appointing the person, so it's not that we made up this process for a resolution, that's what they ask for.
Right, right. I'm just suggesting, because we're so small, and rather than doing this each time, it would just make sense to me to have an ongoing resolution that says that on an annual basis, the mayor, then the vice mayor, who's ever in rotation, or if the mayor doesn't decide to go, wants to be the vice mayor, then the vice mayor would appoint the, if not.
I suppose we could make that an obligation for the mayor or the vice mayor, but I'll tell you that in my 9 years of office, every time it's been here in Hollywood, I've attended because I think it's a valuable resource, and maybe one other person on the commission has attended.
Just primarily you.
So I get a couple of months here. I leave it to you. The resolution's there.
You guys decide. What do you want to do?
Let's vote on it. Let Rox go. Commissioner Ross.
No, the mayor's going, and that's
You're gonna
fine.
go? So you're going to vote?
But I don't think we should make a decision today for people 3 years from now. I
Oh,
think
okay.
they
So
should
we'll do it
decide
on
for
a-
themselves.
We do this every year, and I'm just suggesting that we keep a standing protocol so that we're not having to do this all the time. We're a small little city, it costs us money every time we do it. I just don't. Just a thought. I know there's financial sides associated with it as well, so the other issue is to build in the budget to allow one person to go, and then whoever the appointed is, whoever that is.
We make room in the budget to pay up to half of the tuition to attend, and
Yeah.
every year I've gotten reimbursed for one half, whether it was here or it was in Orlando. I received back one half of the tuition and paid for the rest, so. Today's question is, who will be the voting delegate?
In honor, since this is your last time doing it, you've been doing it every 9 years and paying for it, I would vote, in this case, to allow Commissioner Ross to be the voting member.
Spend your other half.
Is there is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Commissioner Ross, 11A.
11A has to do with FEMA and their hurricane hazard mitigation grant program. Funding is available. I mentioned it to the manager. I didn't hear much back, so I decided to put it as an agenda item for the rest of the commission to review. Since then, on Friday, Krishna did tell me that he has something in the works. And I'm going to turn to him in a minute and ask him to give us the details on that. But there's a 25% cost share, which we can easily budget for the next year. We talked back a while ago about improving Village Hall with propane or gas generator, and this very rare opportunity for free money from the federal government is something that I would not want to pass up. So turn it over to Christian to tell us what his plan is.
I met with Reserve Officer Juan Valiente, and he is working on this grant. He's doing some research now, as well as we'll start putting together the grant. He should have, hopefully put it together, or at least a report to me on it on the 20th of this month. So.
I know it's due on the 6th, and I know what these things take, so it's on August 6th, I believe,
Right.
correct?
But I'll be in touch with him prior to that, so if he needs additional hands in this prior to that.
To get
we
it done,
can
so
get
we
those.
should be able to get it done by the 6th in submission? Okay,
that's the
so
plan.
is there any action item that needs to be taken on this? None? Okay.
Well, I guess as long as
The cost sharing part, right, is the concern, right?
I'm sorry?
The cost share is something we would have to have a consensus to move on, correct?
We would provide, that would be provided for in the budget, I suppose, just so long as the manager has the consensus from the commission to proceed with his best efforts, I'd be satisfied.
Okay, do we have a consensus to ask them to go ahead and direct the manager to proceed with the grant?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, yes.
Do we have a consensus that if we get the grant, that we will fund it moving forward in the next budget?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. 12A.
Oh, I'm sorry, just to finish that up, a little side piece on grants. In your report, you reported that we didn't make it to the Public Space Challenge for the Parks and Recreation. It's something that our Parks Director was aiming at.
Yes.
And I just wanted to point out that Florida Department of Environmental Protection gives FERDAP grants specifically for parks.
Yep.
There is a webinar on July 17th, and that is for the for the legislature's Florida budget for 1920.
Mhm.
Applications are accepted October 1st through the 15th, but I think that attending that or listening to that webinar on July 17th will be very beneficial for the Parks Director to get involved in.
Absolutely.
And
Thank
so I just want to hand that over so that he can possibly take advantage of that.
Thank you very much.
That's done.
Okay. Okay, 12A. Also your item.
Proposed goal setting workshop. As I noticed other cities getting ready for their trim notification and for their workshops, I thought, I remember when we did last year, go through some exercise so that we could convey to the administration those things that a majority of the commission can get behind for the upcoming budget. And I thought that was a very useful exercise for us, so I'd like to come back and do that again. And, the memo's there for you to read. I would appreciate if we could set a time to do this one evening, maybe sit down for 2 hours and throw out ideas and see what we can pull together as priorities.
Yes, and I think providing what we had done last year is a good starting point as well. What I'd also like to see, if I may, this is kind of an aside, and I know the manager and I have discussed this. What would be helpful, I know this has been nothing but a firefighting year for you. What I would find that might be helpful, I know you had mentioned it to me that you had wanted to do this. Do you want to discuss doing a master calendar so that all these things are set? And then we could do quarterly updates on where we are with the items. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, since that was kind of what you had brought to my attention?
That's not really, that would be part of this going forward, I guess, as far as just setting a master calendar for the village, and that has a longevity beyond me as manager. Whoever comes in after me down the road, assuming I get hit by a bus or something, they'll at least have a list of their calendar that tells them, okay, this is July, we have trim notice, we have this, that, and the other thing, and it just sort of gets a schedule going.
And the other thing I know challenging, and the manager has referred to some of my meetings with him as the dump truck. I'll share that with all of you, because I tend to give him a plethora of things that I'd like to see achieved. But the reality is there's a certain finite amount of resources and time. And so one of the things moving forward with project management is we fund items. And residents go, why aren't we seeing this done, or why aren't we seeing this done? If we have a master calendar where we can see all the things that are being worked on, there may be more understanding as to why things may have been postponed or not quite getting it on time. I think that would also be helpful for the public, transparency-wise.
If I may, and that was a little bit off topic, but just to sort of complete the circle and bring it into topic, is I attached the sheets that we used last year, the dots. I don't know if we can bring them up. But if you were to envision your calendar, your ongoing calendar, to include what were the priorities and what steps have we taken to accomplish, accomplish those priorities. And then maybe we could see, like you're saying, tick things off. What worked, what didn't work, what are the things we left behind, we need to bring them up in priority. I think that would be very helpful. Short of having a more strategic, more solid plan, at least it'll be some framework.
And I think having GMS there will also be very helpful in terms of financially, as realistic what we can or cannot do, and also man hours. I think one of the things we don't talk about when we stick the stickers up and all decide what we want, and which I do regularly to you, and you look at me sometimes glaringly like, are you serious? Is the amount of time it would take in man hours to do that, and the resources and that you need to do that project management wise. So if you'll use that in your consideration as we continue to dump our wish list on you moving forward as well. So any other comments?
No.
Quick comment? Okay, do we want to set a date? Because I know we definitely need to do this prior to our budget hearing, so is there a date that we all can look at? And maybe pick a couple dates, since Commissioner Johnson-Sardello is not here today.
I think it'll be important to have some idea about the budget.
Okay, so time frame for the budget. Okay, so 30th?
July 31st.
Perfect.
Yeah, somebody was already missing that.
31st?
Oh,
No.
Shouldn't we do this before we set the trim? Or, I guess, since we're setting the maximum, we could just set the maximum and... Right.
Right. So do you want to do that on the 30th? Or 31st, I'm sorry? Tuesday the 31st, does that work?
I'm free.
And can we have one alternative day just in case?
So the prior week was no good, right?
No good, yep.
30th?
The 30, yeah, 31st will work. I'll set something else, I'll move something else around.
You sure?
So, yeah.
Well, we were going to set the trim on the 30th. Do we want to just continue and do set the trim on the 30th and have the meeting on the 30th? But then that requires the attorney to be here, correct?
For the trim,
Set the trim?
Usually, yeah, for the trim meeting, we are present at that. But if you're gonna do a workshop, you can do the workshop immediately before, or you can do immediately after. And then we don't need to be there for the workshop.
Okay, would there be an objection to do it on the 30th? We'll set the trim. We can do that. We can even do it at 6:30 and make it early, and then set the trim, and then by 7 have our workshop. Does that work for everybody?
Does that work for you?
Yep. So that's the 30th.
30th.
So 6:30 we'll set the trim. 7 o'clock workshop to 9 o'clock. Does that work for everybody? Okay.
Trim notice. No, I think that's good enough. I mean, just to say that if we don't set the trim, we would be forced to live with the rollback rate, which is not going to work for us. So we want to make sure that we do it. I have it's something that I mentioned months ago, and I haven't completed it. It had to do with solar panels and sort of encouraging people to use solar panels by forgiving the permitting for that feature. I'll try to put together for next month.
I'm trying to put together the construction piece that I had postponed until we have a contract. But my goal is to bring back some of the construction issues in a much shorter, condensed version. I had the privilege of meeting with manager and staff and getting their input. My goal is to have staff actually put some of that together for us with their suggestions of what they can do internally, process-wise, and then minimize the amount of ordinances and the amount of money we're spending on ordinance, just so that we can either do much of that internally. But some of the critical pieces that we may have to do in the ordinance to address some of the concerns that a lot of the residents have been putting forward. So my goal is to bring that forward. And that's all I have.
Commissioner Johnson Cedillo also had mentioned that she wanted me to add four persons she was going to be able to be here tonight. Regarding Stone Street sign.
I'm sorry? Street signage?
Sort of like the blue stone street signs that they have in the Dales on the corners. She's looking at that as a way to help protect the corners and that sort of thing. So that was a big cost.
Street signage, yeah. Village attorney?
No report.
Thank you. Village manager?
No report.
Board
Oh,
meeting, reports?
Question? Our contracts for debris removal and monitoring? I just want to make sure that we have that front and center since we're in hurricane season and
Definitely. And we have actually received the debris monitoring one back with final revisions today from the attorney, and the debris collection one is with the attorneys now for comments. So we should get those back hopefully by the end of this week, and we can go to RFP then. Move forward.
And a reminder that when we publish that RFP, if notice could be sent to the commission, because that means that there's a cone of silence, and just want to put everybody on notice about it.
Board committee reports, there's nobody here. I do want to make one comment also too. I do want to make sure that I know you've been trying to get training for all of your board members, not just the public safety advisory board, but if we can somehow, working after your, working with somebody to get the boards trained, as well, and see if we can get that date set up as well.
There must be some, I'm sorry, there must be some online resource, a webinar that they can just,
But those are the public records.
Through Attorney General, we will have trouble getting our schedules together, so.
Thank you very much. Is there any additional comments?
just a little information update, excuse me, for the village manager. Since Commissioner Ross had brought up about funding being available because of Hurricane Irma and such, there's also a program from the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. It's a Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery grant program. I'm waiting to get back a little bit more information from them before I give it to you. I just don't want to just hand you no information, but it looks like that they'll be reconnecting with local governments probably within the next month or so to touch base with them and let them know how they can apply for some of the monies. Right now, they're just doing money for housing, but part of the program will cover infrastructure improvements, roadways that may have damage and stuff like that. So I'm waiting to hear back from the contact there at the state. Once I get that set up, I'll get that to you.
Any other announcements?
Wednesday, July 11th, I have a Public Art Advisor Board at 6 p.m. On Monday, July 16th, we have a Planning and Zoning Advisor Board at 6:30 p.m. Thursday, July 19th, we have Parks and Parkway Advisor Board at 7 p.m. Wednesday, July 25th, we have a Public Safety Advisor Board at 7 p.m. And Monday, August 6th, we have a Planning Zone Advisor Board at 6:30 p.m. Our next special commission meeting will be tomorrow, July 11th at 6:30 p.m. And our next regular commission meeting is scheduled for August 7, 2018 at 7 p.m.
One announcement I've been asked to do, which is on the Mango Festival, which, for those of you who don't know it, we're having a bring your own mango treats and come participate. It's from 2 to 4 on July 14th. That's done by the Art Board and I think the Foundation as well. Thank you. At the Recreation Center. Tomorrow night's meeting will be presentations by the attorneys. There'll be 3 presentations by the finalists for tomorrow. Thank you.
You know, I have actually one other little bit of information. A couple of months back, we had given direction to the village manager about moving forward with an emergency notification system. Had some conversations with the village manager, and actually, I forwarded you the email I got from the state. Actually, will provide to local municipalities at no local cost Everbridge, which is kind of the big ticket item of Everbridge and Nixle. They're both within the same company. So I did confirm with the state that is at no local cost. They provided me with a draft of their agreement that we would execute. So I forwarded that to the village manager. So it looks like we may be able to have that system at no cost to the village.
Are you going to put that for us on the agenda or the managers?
Probably be an item for the manager to put on the agenda.
We originally been planning to move forward with Nixle, and then Commissioner Ross and Commissioner Tudor both actually mentioned this other program. Commissioner Tudor went ahead and researched it and sent me the information on it, so we can move forward with that.
Great. Thank you. Okay, if there's no other comments, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and those of you who stay all the time. Thank you.